Let me ask you something you might not say out loud, but I think you've felt it. When was the last time someone asked you, "So what are you doing after graduation?" And something inside you just went quiet. Not because you don't have answers, but because the answers you are supposed to give, the resume, the corporate job, the 9 to -5, the ladder you are supposed to climb, none of it feels like it leads anywhere you actually want to go. You're not lazy. You're not afraid of hard work. You've watched your parents' generation, your older siblings, your friends who graduated a few years ahead of you. You've seen what happens next. The burnout, the layoffs, the quiet desperation of people who did everything right and still ended up feeling empty. And somewhere along the way, your body started sending you a signal that says, don't step forward, don't commit, don't sign your name on something that feels like a trap wearing a friendly mask. You tell yourself you're figuring things out. You tell yourself you just need more time. But deep down, you know it is something else. It is not that you don't want to grow up. It is that you don't want to grow into something that feels like a slow surrender. You're not refusing to work. You're refusing to be eaten. There is a concept in psychology that might help you understand what is happening inside. It comes from Carl Jung, and it is called the puer aeternus, Latin for eternal youth. Now, before you think this is some fancy term for immature or stuck, let me stop you right there. That is not what this is. The puer aeternus isn't someone who refuses to grow up because they're afraid of responsibility. It is someone who refuses to grow into a world that feels soulless. Think of it this way. Imagine someone hands you a map and says, "This is the path to adulthood. Follow it." But when you look at the map, you realize it leads to a place you don't want to live, a place where your creativity goes to die, a place where you trade your curiosity for a job title, a place where you spend 5 days a week counting down to the weekend, and the weekend is never long enough. Your mind says, "Why would I walk toward that?" So you pause. You hesitate. You stay in the in-between, not because you're lost, but because every direction you've been shown feels like a betrayal of something inside you. The puer aeternus in you isn't afraid of work. They're afraid of waking up one day and realizing they've been sleepwalking through their own life. They're afraid of becoming someone they don't recognize just to pay the bills. They're afraid of trading their aliveness for a paycheck that never quite feels like enough. And here is what most people miss: that hesitation, that pause before you commit. It is not a weakness. It is a signal. It is your soul saying, "I'm not walking into that until I know there is a way to walk through it without losing myself." You're not stuck. You're protecting something. Now, let's talk about what you're actually protecting yourself from. Jung had another idea, one that might hit even closer to home. He called it the devouring mother archetype. And no, this has nothing to do with your actual mother. This is about systems that pretend to nurture you but actually consume you. Think about the corporate world for a moment. Look at how it presents itself. They offer you a chair, a desk, a title, a steady paycheck, health insurance, maybe even a family culture. They say, "Come in, you'll be safe here, we'll take care of you." But slowly, quietly, something happens. They start asking for more. More hours, more loyalty, more of your energy, more of your identity. They want you to care about their mission more than your own. They want you to answer emails at night. They want you to feel guilty for taking time off. They want you to believe that your value as a human being is tied to your productivity. And before you know it, you're not a person anymore. You're a function, a role, a cog in a machine that would replace you in a week if you left. That is the devouring mother. It offers you safety, but only if you hand over your soul at the door. And here is the thing about Gen Z. You see it. You see through it in a way previous generations maybe couldn't. You grew up watching the internet expose the underbelly of everything. You saw the memes about corporate life. You saw your parents stressed at the dinner table. You saw the viral posts about burnout. You saw the mass layoffs where companies thanked employees for their service and then let them go with a 2-week severance. So when the system comes to you now and says, "Join me, it'll be worth it," your body doesn't buy it. Your nervous system says, "I've seen this movie before. I know how it ends." You're not paranoid. You're just paying attention. The system doesn't just want your labor. It wants your loyalty to a lie. It wants you to believe that this is the only way, that adulthood looks one way and one way only, that your worth is measured in output. And you quietly, without even fully realizing it, said, "No, not with a protest, not with a manifesto, just with a deep internal refusal, a refusal to walk into the mouth of something that wants to chew you up and spit out whatever's left. You're not refusing to work. You're refusing to be consumed. But here is the part we don't talk about enough, the part that keeps you up at night. Refusing to walk into the system comes with a price, a heavy one, because while you're standing still, waiting for a better option, the world keeps moving. Your friends post job updates on LinkedIn. Your family asks, "So, any news?" With that tone that is supposed to sound hopeful, but lands like pressure. You watch people your age climb ladders you're not even sure you want to climb, and somewhere in the back of your mind, a voice whispers, "Maybe I'm the one who is broken." You're not broken, but you are stuck between two impossible feelings. On one side, there is the fear of jumping in, the fear of losing yourself in a machine that doesn't care if you live or die, as long as the work gets done. The fear of becoming someone you don't recognize, just to afford rent. But on the other side, there is the fear of staying still forever. The fear that your pause will turn into permanent paralysis. The fear that one day you'll wake up at 35, still waiting for the right path to appear, and realize you've been hiding, not protecting. Psychologists have a name for this kind of response. It is called the freeze response. You've probably heard of fight or flight, but freeze is the third option. It is what happens when your nervous system looks at the situation and decides, "I can't fight this. I can't run from this. So I'll just stop." Freeze isn't laziness. It is survival. It is your brain saying, "The environment feels toxic. Let's wait until it is safe to move." But here is the cruel irony. For a lot of you, it never quite feels safe, because the system isn't changing. The economy isn't fixing itself. The burnout culture isn't disappearing. So you stay frozen, not because you want to, but because every direction still feels like a trap. You're not frozen because you're weak. You're frozen because every direction feels like a trap. And underneath all of that, there is something even quieter. A grief. A grief for the version of adulthood you were promised but never got. The version where hard work paid off, where loyalty was rewarded, where you could buy a home, raise a family, and still feel like yourself at the end of it all. That version doesn't exist anymore, and you know it. So how do you commit to a future you don't believe in? You don't. At least, not yet. And that is not a failure. That is your soul refusing to lie to itself. So where does that leave you? Floating in the in-between, watching the world move while you wait for something to shift. Maybe. But maybe there is another way to look at it. What if your hesitation isn't the end of the story? What if it is the beginning of something else? What if this generation isn't broken? What if you're actually the first one to refuse a broken deal? Think about it. Every generation before you was told, play the game, follow the rules, do what you're told, and you'll be fine. And for a while, that worked. Or at least, it worked well enough that people didn't ask too many questions. But you grew up watching the fine print. You saw the burnout, the layoffs, the mental health crisis, the quiet misery of people who did everything right and still ended up empty. And something in you said, "I'm not doing that. I'm not trading my life for a paycheck that was never going to be enough anyway." That is not avoidance. That is awareness. So maybe adulthood doesn't have to look like surrender. Maybe you can cross the threshold without being consumed. Maybe you can take a job, but keep your boundaries. Maybe you can work, but refuse to let work become your identity. Maybe you can participate in the system without belonging to it. Maybe you can earn a living without losing a life. That is the new kind of adulthood. The kind you get to define. The kind where you decide what you'll give and what you'll protect. The kind where success isn't measured in titles, but in how much of yourself you still recognize at the end of the day. You don't have to have it all figured out right now. You don't have to know exactly what you're building. You just have to keep asking the question, does this path ask me to disappear? And if it does, is there another way? Watching the generation before you burn out isn't just a warning. It is a blueprint of what you're trying to avoid. And that is not pessimistic. That is smart. That is learning from history instead of repeating it. So if you're standing still right now, unsure of where to step, unsure of what comes next, maybe that is okay. Maybe stillness isn't the enemy. Maybe it is the space where you get to hear your own voice again. The voice that got drowned out by all the noise telling you what you should want, who you should be, how you should live. Protecting your soul isn't running away. It is the most adult thing you can do. Because here is the truth they don't tell you. You don't have to burn out to prove you're grown. You don't have to lose yourself to prove you're responsible. You don't have to say yes to everything just because the system asks. You get to choose. Slowly, carefully. One small decision at a time. Maybe adulthood isn't about finally fitting in. Maybe it is about finally being honest about what you won't fit into. The threshold isn't a trap, it is a question. And only you get to write your answer. So take your time. Listen to that hesitation. It is not your enemy. It is your compass. It is pointing you away from the things that would swallow you whole and towards something you haven't named yet. Something truer. Something yours. You're not refusing to grow up. You're refusing to grow into someone else's idea of who you should be. And that is not paralysis. That is the beginning of something real.